The crack of the gavel echoed through the dusty auction yard as Delilah Jameson struggled against the ropes binding her wrists, her copper hair sticking to her tear-stained cheeks. She wasn't livestock, yet here she stood on the wooden platform in Opal, Wyoming, 1878, among men who viewed her as nothing more than property to be purchased and used. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the auction yard, dust swirling around the crowd of rough-looking men who had gathered for the monthly slave auction, despite the practice being illegal since the end of the Civil War. Opal was a lawless frontier town where such prohibitions meant little to those with money and power. "Next up, gentlemen," barked the auctioneer, a portly man with tobacco-stained teeth named Frank Wilkins, a fine specimen of womanhood. 20 years old, healthy and strong. "Can cook, clean, and tend to all your needs." He winked, causing the crowd to erupt in crude laughter. Delilah kept her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. 3 weeks ago, she had been traveling west with her father when bandits attacked their stagecoach. Her father died defending her, but Delilah had been taken and sold to a gang that specialized in human trafficking. Now she stood here, being auctioned off like a prized mare. "Bidding starts at $50, Wilkins announced. "50, called a voice from the crowd. "60, shouted another. The bidding continued, each call driving Delilah deeper into despair. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the sounds of men bartering for her life. $300, came a new voice, quieter than the others but firm with resolve. Delilah's eyes snapped open. At the back of the crowd stood a tall man with broad shoulders, his face shadowed by a worn Stetson. His clothing was dusty from the trail, but even at a distance, she could see the intensity in his stance. "300 going once," Wilkins called, surprised by the jump in bidding. "350, countered a burly man with a scarred face whom Delilah recognized as Vance Thornton, owner of the largest cattle ranch in the county. His reputation for cruelty toward his workers was well known. "400, the stranger responded without hesitation. "450. $500, the stranger said, stepping forward so that Delilah could see his face clearly for the first time. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 25, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. "500 from Sawyer Zimmerman," Wilkins announced, recognizing the man. "Do I hear 550? Thornton hesitated, sizing up his competition. "550, he finally said, though with less confidence. "600, Sawyer countered immediately. The crowd murmured. These were substantial sums for a frontier town. Thornton's face darkened. "700. "Everything I have," Sawyer said, pulling a leather pouch from his vest pocket. He stepped forward and emptied it onto the auctioneer's table. Gold coins and bills spilled out. $873. "Every cent I've saved over 5 years working my claim." A hush fell over the crowd. Even Thornton seemed taken aback by the unexpected display. $873 going once, Wilkins called, eyeing the pile of money greedily. "Going twice." Thornton spat on the ground. "You'll regret this, Zimmerman," he growled before turning away. Sold to Sawyer Zimmerman for $873. Delilah felt her legs weaken. She had been sold, but to whom? A man who had spent his entire savings to purchase her. What did he want from her? What would happen now? Sawyer approached the platform, his expression unreadable as he paid Wilkins. The auctioneer handed him a piece of paper, a bill of sale, and Sawyer folded it carefully before tucking it inside his vest. "Come with me," he said quietly as he helped Delilah down from the platform. His touch was gentle but firm on her elbow as he guided her through the dispersing crowd. Delilah walked beside him, acutely aware of the stares following them. Sawyer led her to a hitching post where a chestnut mare waited patiently. Without speaking, he took a knife from his boot and cut the ropes binding her wrists. Delilah rubbed her raw skin, eyeing him warily. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice hoarse from days of disuse. Sawyer looked at her directly for the first time. "Nothing," he replied, handing her the bill of sale. "You're free to go wherever you wish. I couldn't stand by and watch them sell you to Thornton." Delilah stared at the paper in her hands, then back at him, unable to comprehend his words. "Free," she echoed. "Free," he confirmed. "Though I'd advise against staying in Opal. Thornton isn't a man who takes kindly to losing, and there are others who might try to take you again." "I have nowhere to go," Delilah admitted, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. Her father was dead, their money and possessions stolen, and she was alone in an unfamiliar and hostile territory. Sawyer hesitated, then said, "I have a small cabin and claim about 15 miles west of here. It's not much, but you'd be safe there until you decide what you want to do next." Delilah studied him, searching for deception in his eyes but finding only sincerity. Still, experience had taught her caution. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "My mother was Cherokee," Sawyer explained quietly. "She was taken from her people and sold to a white man when she was 16. She was one of the lucky ones. He turned out to be a decent man who eventually freed and married her. But I've seen what happens to women who aren't so fortunate." He paused. "No one deserves to be owned by another." Delilah felt tears welling in her eyes but forced them back. She would not cry now, not when she had somehow found an unexpected ally in this wilderness. "Thank you," she whispered. "You can thank me by staying alive," Sawyer replied pragmatically. "Can you ride?" Delilah nodded. Her father had insisted she learn horsemanship from an early age. "Good." Sawyer helped her mount his mare, then took the reins and began leading them away from town on foot. "We should put some distance between us and Opal before nightfall." They traveled in silence for several miles, following a narrow trail that wound through sagebrush and scattered pine. The sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the land. Delilah watched Sawyer's back as he walked ahead of her, trying to reconcile the fact that this stranger had spent everything he had to rescue her. "Mr. Zimmerman," she finally said, "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Sawyer glanced back at her. "Sawyer is fine. And there's nothing to repay. You spent your life savings on me," he shrugged. "Money comes and goes. My claim is still producing enough gold to get by. You're a gold miner, small scale, not enough to make me rich but enough to live on." He paused. "I was saving to buy more land, maybe start a proper ranch someday." Delilah felt the weight of what he had sacrificed. "And now that money is gone, because of me." "Because I chose to spend it," he corrected, "and I don't regret it." As the sky darkened, Sawyer led them off the main trail to a small clearing beside a creek. "We'll camp here tonight," he said, helping Delilah dismount. "My cabin's still another 8 miles or so." He efficiently set up a small camp, gathering firewood and starting a fire while Delilah watered the horse. When she returned, he was laying out a simple meal of jerky, hard biscuits, and coffee. "It's not much," he apologized, offering her a tin plate. "It's more than I've had in days," she replied truthfully, accepting the food gratefully. As they ate, Delilah gathered her courage and asked, "How did you know to be at the auction today?" Sawyer's expression darkened. "Word gets around. When I heard Wilkins was planning another illegal auction, I knew I had to do something. I've tried to get the territorial marshal involved before, but Wilkins has too many friends in high places." "You've done this before, purchase people to free them," he nodded. "When I can. Usually not at such high prices, though. Thornton drove up the bidding. Why would he want me so badly? Sawyer hesitated. Thornton's wife died last winter. He's been looking for a replacement. His tone made clear what kind of replacement Thornton had in mind. Delilah shuddered. I'm even more grateful for your intervention. Get some rest, Sawyer said, changing the subject. You can use my bedroll. I'll keep watch. Don't you need sleep too? I'm used to long nights. He stood and added more wood to the fire. We'll head out at first light. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Delilah for a long time. She lay wrapped in Sawyer's blankets, watching him silhouetted against the firelight, wondering what kind of man spent everything he had to free a stranger. Dawn broke clear and cool, the morning dew glistening on the sagebrush. Sawyer had coffee brewing by the time Delilah awoke, and they shared a quick breakfast before continuing their journey. The landscape grew more rugged as they traveled, the trail climbing into pine-covered hills. By midday, they crested a ridge, and Sawyer pointed to a small clearing below where a log cabin nestled against a hillside. There it is, he said. Home. It was a modest dwelling but well built, with a small corral adjacent to it and a stream running nearby. Smoke rose from the chimney, which caused Sawyer to frown. I wasn't expecting company, he murmured, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. As they approached, the cabin door opened, and an elderly man with a long white beard stepped out, rifle in hand. When he saw Sawyer, he lowered his weapon and grinned. About time you showed up, boy. Been wondering if you'd gotten yourself killed. Just delayed, Doc, Sawyer replied, visibly relaxing. What brings you out here? Came to check your supplies like I promised. The old man's eyes shifted to Delilah, and his bushy eyebrows rose. And who might this young lady be? Delilah Jameson, she answered for herself. Mr. Zimmerman helped me out of a difficult situation in Opal. Did he now? Doc's eyes twinkled with curiosity. Well, any friend of Sawyer's is welcome here. I'm Doc Pritchard, though I haven't practiced medicine properly in years. Doc lives about 3 miles east, Sawyer explained. He's the closest thing to a neighbor I have. Doc helped Delilah dismount while Sawyer took care of the horse. Sawyer mentioned a difficult situation, Doc said quietly. You all right, miss? I will be, Delilah replied, not wanting to discuss her ordeal. Doc seemed to understand and didn't press further. Well, I've restocked your pantry and left some medicine for that cough of yours, Sawyer. I should head back before dark. Stay for supper at least, Sawyer offered. Doc shook his head. Can't. Mrs. Hawkins is expecting her baby any day now, and I promised to stay close to town. He winked at Delilah. Besides, 3's a crowd. Before either could protest, Doc was mounting his mule and tipping his hat. Miss Jameson, it's been a pleasure. Sawyer, try not to be such a stranger in town. As Doc rode away, Delilah turned to find Sawyer watching her with an unreadable expression. He seems nice, she offered. Doc's one of the good ones, Sawyer agreed. Saved my life once when I came down with mountain fever. Come on, let me show you around. The cabin was larger inside than it appeared from outside, with one main room containing a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with chairs, and basic cooking equipment. A ladder led to a small loft area. Everything was simple but neat and well-maintained. You can take the bed up in the loft, Sawyer said. I'll sleep down here by the fire. I can't put you out of your bed, you're not, he interrupted. I often sleep by the fire anyway. Delilah didn't argue further. After the weeks of hardship she'd endured, the prospect of a real bed, even a simple one, was too appealing to refuse. While Sawyer tended to his horse, Delilah explored the cabin more thoroughly. She found a small shelf of books surprising in a frontier miner's cabin containing volumes of poetry, history, and practical guides to mining and farming. On a crude desk in the corner, lay a journal open to a half-written page, the handwriting neat and precise. Sawyer returned to find her examining his small library. "You like to read?" he asked. "Very much," she replied. "My father was a teacher before we decided to come west." "What brought you out here?" Delilah's expression clouded. "My mother died last year." Father thought a fresh start would do us both good. He had accepted a position at a school in Oregon. She paused, fighting back tears. "We never made it." Sawyer didn't offer empty condolences, which Delilah appreciated. Instead, he said, "You're welcome to read any of those books while you're here. Now, are you hungry?" They prepared a simple but satisfying meal together, Delilah insisting on helping despite Sawyer's protests. As they ate, Sawyer explained more about his life in Wyoming Territory. "I came out here after the war," he said. "Fought for the Union, saw too much death, wanted somewhere quiet away from people." "Yet you risk everything to help strangers," Delilah observed. Sawyer looked uncomfortable with her assessment. "Not everything, just money." "Money that represented years of your life," he shrugged. "There's more to life than money." After dinner, Sawyer showed Delilah to the creek where she could wash up in privacy. The cool water felt glorious against her skin, washing away the grime of captivity. When she returned to the cabin, she found clean clothing laid out for her, a man's shirt and trousers, far too large but infinitely better than her filthy dress. "They were my mother's," Sawyer explained, looking embarrassed. "She was taller than you, but they should do until we can get you proper clothes." Delilah was touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you for everything." Later, as she settled into the small bed in the loft, listening to Sawyer moving quietly below, Delilah felt truly safe for the first time since her father's death. Her future remained uncertain, but for tonight at least, she had shelter, food, and the protection of a man who had already proven his willingness to help her at great personal cost. The next morning, Delilah woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. She dressed quickly in the oversized clothing Sawyer had provided and descended the ladder to find him cooking at the small cast-iron stove. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. "Good. Thought we might ride into the trading post today, get you some proper clothes and whatever else you need." Delilah frowned. "I don't have any money." "I still have some small savings hidden away," Sawyer said. "And the trading post isn't in Opal, it's to the north, run by a Shoshone family I trade with regularly. We should be safe there." After breakfast, they rode together on Sawyer's mare, Delilah sitting behind him with her arms wrapped hesitantly around his waist. The closeness was necessary but unfamiliar, and she found herself acutely aware of his solid presence before her. The trading post was a 2-hour ride from Sawyer's cabin, situated at a crossroads where several trails converged. It consisted of a large log structure with attached stables and corrals, with several teepees visible behind it. A Shoshone man about Sawyer's age emerged as they dismounted. "Sawyer, been wondering when you'd show up." His English was perfect, with barely an accent. "Daniel," Sawyer greeted him with a handshake. "This is Miss Delilah Jameson. Delilah, this is Daniel Eagle Road. His family runs this trading post." Daniel's dark eyes assessed Delilah curiously but kindly. "Welcome, Miss Jameson. Any friend of Sawyer's is welcome here." "Daniel's sister might have some clothing that would fit you better than what you're wearing," Sawyer suggested. Daniel nodded. "Sarah's inside. She'll help you." Delilah followed Daniel into the trading post, while Sawyer stayed outside to water their horse. The interior was well organized, with goods ranging from practical necessities to beautifully crafted Shoshone beadwork. Sarah Eagle Road was arranging fabrics when they entered. She was perhaps a few years older than Delilah, with long black hair and an intelligent face. After Daniel explained the situation, Sarah smiled warmly at Delilah. "Come with me," she said, leading Delilah to a back room. "I think I have several things that might suit you." Over the next hour, Sarah helped Delilah select appropriate clothing: 2 simple dresses, a riding skirt, several blouses, undergarments, and a warm shawl for the cool mountain evenings. When Delilah protested the expense, Sarah waved her concerns away. "Sawyer has helped our family many times," she explained. "He taught my brother better English, showed him how to negotiate fair prices with white traders. We owe him much." Dressed in one of her new outfits, a practical blue dress with a white collar, Delilah returned to the main room to find Sawyer in conversation with Daniel. Both men looked up when she entered, but it was Sawyer's reaction that caught her attention. His eyes widened slightly, and he seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "That's much better," he finally said, his voice gruffer than usual. Daniel grinned knowingly at his friend's reaction. "Sarah has good taste. You look very nice, Miss Jameson." "Thank you," Delilah replied, feeling a blush creep up her cheeks under Sawyer's continued gaze. They stayed for lunch, accepting the Eagle Road's hospitality. Delilah listened as Sawyer and Daniel discussed local matters: rumors of new silver strikes, concerns about increased tensions between settlers and native tribes further north, gossip about mutual acquaintances. As they prepared to leave, Sarah pressed a small package into Delilah's hands. "Herbs for tea," she explained. "Good for calming the spirit after difficult times." Delilah thanked her, touched by the gesture. She was beginning to see that Sawyer had built a life out here that included friendships and mutual respect across cultural boundaries, something rare in the frontier territories. On the ride home, Delilah asked about his relationship with the Eagle Road family. "I met them my first year out here," Sawyer explained. "I was green, didn't know the land. Daniel found me half dead from exposure during a spring blizzard. His family nursed me back to health, taught me how to survive in this country. They seem to hold you in high regard. We help each other. That's how it works out here if you want to survive." Delilah thought about that as they rode. "Is that why you helped me? For survival?" Sawyer was quiet for so long that Delilah thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "No, that was different." He didn't elaborate, and Delilah didn't press him further. When they returned to the cabin, Sawyer showed Delilah his small garden plot and the basics of his gold mining operation, a simple sluice box set up in the creek where he panned for gold. "It's not a big operation," he explained, "but the creek has been good to me. There's still color in these hills if you know where to look." Delilah watched as he demonstrated the panning technique, his large hands moving with surprising delicacy as he swirled water and sediment in the pan, eventually revealing a few tiny flakes of gold along the bottom rim. "It's beautiful," she murmured, leaning closer to see the glittering specks. "Worth about 25 cents, Sawyer said with a self-deprecating smile. "Takes a lot of these to make a fortune." "Yet you gave away all your savings for me," Delilah said softly, looking up to find his face unexpectedly close to hers. Sawyer's eyes met hers for a charged moment before he straightened and handed her the pan. "Your turn to try." The next few days established a routine. Sawyer worked his claim in the mornings while Delilah took over domestic duties, grateful for the opportunity to repay his kindness in some small way. In the afternoons, he taught her about the local plants and animals, showing her which berries were safe to eat and which were poisonous, how to recognize bear sign, and what bird calls signaled danger. Delilah proved a quick study, and Sawyer seemed impressed by her adaptability. One evening as they sat by the fire, she asked the question that had been on her mind. "What happens next, Sawyer? I can't stay here indefinitely, living off your charity." "Why not?" he asked simply. "Winter's coming. Travel will be difficult soon. At least stay until spring." "And then what?" "Then you decide what you want to do. Maybe by then you'll have figured out your next step." Delilah considered this. "I should find work, earn my own way." "There's not much employment for women in these parts unless you want to work in a saloon," Sawyer pointed out. "And that comes with its own dangers." "I could teach," Delilah suggested. "That was my father's profession, and he taught me everything he knew. Many frontier communities need teachers." Sawyer nodded slowly. "That's true. There's talk of starting a proper school in Riverbend, about 20 miles from here. It's a decent town, growing fast with the railroad coming through. You've been there a few times. It's where I sell most of my gold." He stared into the fire. "We could ride over there next week. Ask around about teaching positions if you'd like." Delilah smiled, touched by his willingness to help her establish independence. "I'd like that very much." The topic settled, they lapsed into comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Delilah found herself watching Sawyer surreptitiously, admiring the strong line of his jaw, the way the firelight played across his features. She had noticed his physical appeal from the beginning, but over the past days, she'd come to appreciate his character even more, his quiet competence, his unexpected gentleness, his principled stance against injustice. What she couldn't quite decipher were his feelings toward her. He treated her with unfailing courtesy and seemed to enjoy her company, but he maintained a certain reserve, never crossing the boundary of propriety despite their unusual living arrangement. Delilah's thoughts were interrupted by a distant howl. "Wolf?" she asked. Sawyer nodded. "There's a pack that hunts these hills. They generally keep their distance from humans. They sound so lonely. They're not. Wolves are pack animals. They're rarely alone unless something's wrong." Sawyer added another log to the fire. "People are the ones who choose solitude. Like you." Delilah asked softly. His eyes met hers across the flames. It wasn't always a choice. Before Delilah could ask what he meant, a sudden pounding at the door startled them both. Sawyer was on his feet instantly, hand on his revolver as he moved to the window. "Who is it?" he called out, peering through the darkness. "Sawyer, it's Daniel. I need help." Sawyer quickly unbolted the door to reveal Daniel Eagle Road, his face strained with worry and exhaustion. "What's happened?" Sawyer asked, ushering him inside. "Thornton's men raided our trading post," Daniel explained breathlessly. "They took our winter supplies, burned one of our storage buildings. My father was shot. He's alive, but badly wounded." "Why would Thornton attack you?" Delilah asked, horrified. Daniel's eyes flicked to her. "They were looking for you, Miss Jameson. They seemed to think we might be hiding you." Sawyer's expression darkened. "How did they know to look for her at your place?" "Word got around about what happened at the auction. Someone must have seen us together at the trading post." Daniel accepted the cup of water Delilah offered him. "My family sent me to warn you. Thornton's men said they're coming here next." Sawyer began moving immediately, gathering essentials and weapons. "How long ago did they leave your place?" "About 3 hours." "They were drunk, celebrating their victory. That might slow them down. Or make them more dangerous," Sawyer muttered. He turned to Delilah. "Pack only what you absolutely need. We have to leave now." Delilah hurried to obey, her hands trembling as she gathered her few possessions. This was her fault. People had been hurt because of her. Within 15 minutes they were ready. Sawyer had loaded his rifle and revolver, packed food and supplies, and saddled his horse. He helped Delilah mount, then turned to Daniel. "You should come with us," he urged. "It's not safe for you to return alone." Daniel shook his head. "My family needs me. Besides, they've already done their damage to us. It's you two they want now." "Where will you go?" Daniel asked Sawyer. "North, into the high country. I know places where we can hide until the snow drives them back down." Daniel gripped Sawyer's arm. "Be careful, my friend. Thornton is not a man who forgets a grudge." "Neither am I," Sawyer replied grimly. He mounted behind Delilah and took the reins. "Tell your father I'll come back to help rebuild when I can." They rode away from the cabin at a steady pace, Sawyer guiding the horse along a barely visible trail that wound deeper into the mountains. The night was clear and cold, stars blazing overhead in a way Delilah had never seen in the east. "I'm so sorry," she said after they had ridden in silence for some time. "This is all because of me." "No," Sawyer corrected firmly. "This is because of Thornton and men like him who think they can own people and take whatever they want." "But if you hadn't helped me, if I hadn't helped you, you'd be suffering far worse at Thornton's hands right now," Sawyer said. "I don't regret my choice, Delilah. Don't you regret it either?" His use of her given name the first time he had done so caught her attention. There was something in his voice, a warmth and intimacy that made her heart beat faster despite their precarious situation. They rode through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horse. By dawn, they had climbed high into the mountains, the air noticeably thinner and cooler. Sawyer finally called a halt in a small clearing surrounded by dense pine forest. "We'll rest here for a few hours," he decided. "They won't be able to follow our trail easily, and we all need sleep." He unsaddled the horse and set out a simple camp, spreading his bedroll for Delilah. When she protested, he shook his head. "You need rest more than I do. I'll keep watch for a while, then wake you when it's your turn." Too exhausted to argue, Delilah lay down, pulling the blanket around her against the mountain chill. Despite her anxiety, fatigue overcame her quickly and she fell into a deep sleep. She woke to Sawyer gently shaking her shoulder. The sun was high overhead, indicating she had slept for several hours. "My turn to watch?" she asked, sitting up groggily. "No, we need to move," Sawyer replied, his voice tense. "I spotted smoke to the south could be a campfire. They might be following our trail after all." They quickly broke camp and continued north, the terrain growing increasingly rugged. Sawyer led them along game trails and stream beds, occasionally doubling back or taking seemingly random turns. "Are you trying to confuse them?" Delilah asked. "And confuse our trail," Sawyer confirmed. "The horse leaves tracks, but if we cross enough water and hard ground, they'll have a harder time following us." By late afternoon, they reached a high alpine meadow surrounded by rocky outcroppings. A small, rough-hewn cabin stood at one edge, nearly invisible among the trees until they were almost upon it. "What is this place?" Delilah asked as they dismounted. "Old trapper's cabin," Sawyer explained. "I found it my second year out here, fixed it up a bit. Not many people know about it." The cabin was crude but solid, with a stone fireplace and a single room containing a bed frame with a straw-filled mattress, a table with a single chair, and a few basic supplies stored in crates. "It's not much," Sawyer apologized, "but it should be safe for now." "It's perfect," Delilah assured him, relieved to have shelter. While Sawyer tended to the horse and gathered firewood, Delilah set about making the cabin more habitable, sweeping out dust and spiderwebs and organizing their supplies. By the time Sawyer returned, she had a small fire going in the fireplace and was heating water for coffee. "You're adjusting well to frontier life," he observed, setting down an armload of wood. Delilah shrugged. "I'm trying. It helps to stay busy, keeps me from thinking too much about everything that's happened." Sawyer studied her for a moment, then said quietly, "You're stronger than you know, Delilah." She looked up, startled by the compliment and the admiration in his eyes. I don't feel strong. I feel scared and responsible for putting you and the Eagle Roads in danger. Being scared doesn't mean you're not strong. It means you understand the situation. He moved to the doorway and gazed out at the meadow, now bathed in golden late afternoon light. We should be safe here for a while. The first heavy snow will make these mountains impassable, and Thornton's men aren't likely to risk getting stranded up here. How long until that happens? Could be days, could be weeks. Weather in these mountains is unpredictable. What will we do until then? Sawyer turned back to her. Survive. That's all any of us can do out here. That night they shared the single bed, Sawyer insisting on sleeping on top of the blankets while Delilah slept beneath them. Despite the propriety of the arrangement, Delilah was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the sound of his breathing, the warmth of his body. It was both comforting and disconcerting, and it took her a long time to fall asleep. The next days fell into a routine. Sawyer hunted for food while Delilah maintained their shelter and gathered edible plants he had taught her to identify. They worked well together, developing an easy rhythm that required few words. In the evenings, they talked. Sawyer proved to be surprisingly well-read for a frontier miner, and Delilah enjoyed their discussions about books they had both read. He told her more about his past, his childhood in Missouri with his Cherokee mother and white father, his service in the Union Army, his decision to seek solitude in the Wyoming Territory after the war. "I saw too much death," he explained one night as they sat by the fire. "Too much hatred. Needed to find a place where a man is judged by what he does, not who his parents were." "And did you find that here?" Delilah asked. "Sometimes," he replied thoughtfully. "There are good people like the Eagle Roads' Doc Pritchard. And there are men like Thornton who bring the worst of the old world with them." "What about me?" Delilah asked softly. "Where do I fit in your world?" Sawyer looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "You don't fit in my world, Delilah. You've changed it." Before she could ask what he meant, he stood and went to the door, checking the weather as he did every evening. "Snow's coming," he announced. "I can smell it." Sure enough, they woke the next morning to a world transformed. Several inches of snow had fallen during the night, and large flakes continued to drift down from a pearl-gray sky. The meadow was a pristine blanket of white, the surrounding pines frosted like a Christmas scene. "It's beautiful," Delilah breathed, standing in the doorway. "And dangerous," Sawyer reminded her, though he smiled at her wonder. "But this is good news for us. Thornton's men won't be able to reach us now, not until spring thaw." "What about going back down to your cabin? Too risky?" "The trail would be treacherous even without Thornton's men possibly waiting for us." Sawyer surveyed their supplies. "We have enough to last a while if we're careful, and I can hunt when the snow lets up." "So we're trapped here together," Delilah said, suddenly realizing the implications. Sawyer's eyes met hers. "Does that bother you?" "No," she answered truthfully. "Does it bother you?" "No," he replied, a slight smile touching his lips. "Not at all." The snow continued for 3 days, accumulating to nearly 2 feet before it finally stopped. During that time, they remained inside, conserving their supplies and keeping the fire burning against the intensifying cold. On the 4th day, the sun emerged, creating a dazzling landscape of sparkles and shadows. Sawyer went hunting, returning several hours later with a small deer slung across his shoulders. "This will keep us fed for a couple of weeks if we're careful," he said as he began to dress the carcass outside the cabin. Delilah insisted on helping, and though the work was bloody and unfamiliar, she approached it with determination. Sawyer showed her how to preserve the meat by smoking some portions and freezing others in the natural cold. "You continue to surprise me," he commented as they worked together. Most Eastern women would faint at the sight of this. "I'm not most women," Delilah replied. "And I'm not Eastern anymore, am I? This is my life now." Sawyer's hand stilled, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Is it? Your life here in the Wyoming Territory?" "For now, at least," she said carefully. "Unless you're eager to be rid of me." "No," he said quickly. "That's not what I meant." Before he could explain further, a distant sound caught their attention, the crack of a rifle echoing across the valley. Sawyer was instantly alert, pulling Delilah behind the cabin and reaching for his rifle. "Get inside," he ordered. "Stay away from the windows." "What is it? Thornton's men?" she asked, fear constricting her throat. "Maybe, or other hunters. Either way, we're not taking chances." They remained vigilant as darkness fell, but no further shots were heard, and no one approached the cabin. Still, Sawyer insisted on taking turns keeping watch through the night, and Delilah didn't argue. During her watch, sitting by the small window with Sawyer's revolver in her lap, Delilah contemplated how much her life had changed in just a few short weeks. She had lost her father and nearly lost her freedom, only to find herself in this remote wilderness with a man she was increasingly certain she was falling in love with. The realization should have frightened her, but instead, it brought a strange calm. Whatever happened next, her life had been irrevocably altered by Sawyer Zimmerman, the quiet miner who had spent everything he had to set her free. Morning came without incident, but Sawyer remained cautious. "I'm going to scout the area," he told Delilah after breakfast. "See if I can find any sign of who fired that shot yesterday." "I should come with you," she argued. "It's not safe for us to separate." "It's less safe for you to be out there if it is Thornton's men," Sawyer countered. "Please, Delilah." "Stay here, keep the door barred, and if anyone but me approaches, use this." He handed her his revolver. Reluctantly, she agreed, and Sawyer departed, rifle in hand, promising to return before midday. Delilah watched from the window as he disappeared into the trees, then set about her daily tasks, trying to keep her mind occupied. Hours passed with excruciating slowness. Midday came and went with no sign of Sawyer. As afternoon waned, Delilah's anxiety grew. She paced the small cabin, alternating between watching out the window and listening at the door for any sound of his return. When she finally heard footsteps crunching through the snow, she rushed to the window, only to freeze in horror. 3 men were approaching the cabin, none of them Sawyer. They were heavily armed and moved with purpose, scanning the area as they advanced. Delilah's hand tightened on the revolver. She knew how to shoot. Her father had taught her as a precaution for their journey west, but she had never fired at a person. Would she be able to do it if necessary? The men were close enough now that she could hear their voices. Smoke's coming from the chimney. Someone's inside. Zimmerman, or the woman. Thornton wants her alive, remember. Delilah's blood ran cold. These were indeed Thornton's men, and they had somehow tracked them to this remote cabin. But where was Sawyer? Had they already found him? Was he? No, she couldn't think that way. She needed to focus on surviving until Sawyer returned. He would return. He had to. The men were at the door now, trying the handle and finding it barred. "Hello in the cabin," one called. "We know you're in there. Come out peacefully and no one gets hurt." Delilah remained silent, her mind racing. The cabin had only one door and 2 small windows, too small for the men to enter but large enough for them to shoot through if they chose. "Last chance," the man called again. "Come out or we'll burn you out." The threat of fire was real. The cabin was dry wood and would burn quickly in the cold, dry air. Delilah knew she couldn't stay inside if they set it ablaze, but surrendering meant returning to the fate Sawyer had saved her from. She moved to the window farthest from the door, keeping to the side to avoid being seen. From this vantage point, she could see two of the men conferring while the third began gathering branches, presumably to start a fire. Making a split-second decision, Delilah aimed Sawyer's revolver through the window and fired at the woodpile, deliberately missing the men but scattering the branches. The men dove for cover, cursing in surprise. "I'm armed," she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I know how to use this gun. Leave now or the next shot won't miss." "You're outnumbered, lady," one of the men shouted back. "Be smart about this." "I'd rather die than go with you to Thornton," she replied truthfully. A tense silence followed. Delilah could see the men whispering to each other, clearly reassessing their approach. She kept the revolver trained on them, hoping they couldn't see how badly her hands were shaking. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the standoff, a rifle shot from the forest behind the men. One of Thornton's henchmen cried out and fell, clutching his leg. The other two spun around, weapons raised, searching for the source of the shot. "That was a warning," Sawyer's voice called from somewhere among the trees. "The next one won't be. Drop your weapons and back away from the cabin." "Zimmerman," one of the men shouted. "You're dead, you hear me? Thornton's put a price on your head." Another shot rang out and the man's hat flew from his head. "I said drop your weapons," Sawyer repeated, his voice cold with authority. The uninjured men hesitated, then slowly placed their guns on the ground. The wounded man remained on the snow, moaning in pain. "Now back away." 20 paces. They complied, helping their injured companion to his feet. As they retreated, Sawyer emerged from the trees to their left, rifle aimed steadily at them. He circled wide, keeping them covered as he approached the cabin. "Are you all right?" he called to Delilah, his eyes never leaving the three men. "Yes," she replied, relief flooding through her. "I'm fine." "Good. Now listen carefully," he addressed Thornton's men. "You're going to leave here. Take your wounded friend and go back to Thornton. Tell him if he sends anyone else after us, they won't return at all. Do you understand?" The apparent leader of the group glared at Sawyer. "You think this is over? Thornton doesn't give up what's his." "She was never his," Sawyer replied evenly. "And neither of us belongs to anyone. That's the message you're taking back." "And if we don't," Sawyer's expression hardened, "then you'll die here in the snow, and no one will ever find your bodies." Something in his voice, a quiet certainty rather than bravado, seemed to convince the men. They nodded reluctantly. "Take your injured man and go," Sawyer ordered. "Your weapons stay here." Once they had disappeared back down the trail, Sawyer quickly gathered their abandoned weapons and entered the cabin. The moment the door closed behind him, Delilah flew into his arms, her composure finally breaking. "I thought they might have killed you," she whispered against his chest. Sawyer held her tightly, his cheek resting on her hair. "I'm sorry I was gone so long. I found their tracks and was following them, trying to determine how many there were. I didn't realize they'd split up and some had already reached the cabin." Delilah pulled back slightly to look at him. "Will they really go back to Thornton?" "For now," Sawyer said grimly. "But we can't stay here. Once they report back, Thornton might send more men or come himself." "Where can we go?" "The snow. There's a pass to the north that should still be open. If we leave at first light tomorrow, we can make it through before the next storm. And then, there's a small settlement on the other side, friendly folk who don't ask too many questions. We can winter there, then decide our next move in the spring." Delilah nodded, trusting his judgment. "I should pack our things." As she moved to begin preparations, Sawyer caught her arm gently. "Delilah, wait." He hesitated, then continued. "What you did today, standing your ground against those men, that was brave." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Being brave isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear." His eyes searched hers. "I need to tell you something I should have said before." Delilah's heart quickened. "What is it? When I bid for you at that auction, it wasn't just about doing the right thing. The moment I saw you standing there, so defiant despite everything," he broke off, struggling for words. "I felt something I can't explain, like I'd been waiting my whole life to find you." Delilah's breath caught. "Sawyer, I don't expect anything from you," he hurried on. "You've been through so much, and the last thing you need is—" She silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. "The last thing I need," she said softly, "is for you to stop talking now." Understanding dawned in his eyes, and he slowly lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deepening as she responded. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and Delilah felt as though something long broken inside her was finally healing. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Sawyer rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have much to offer you," he murmured. "Just a miner's cabin and a life that's often hard and lonely." "You offered everything you had to free a stranger," Delilah reminded him. "That's the kind of man I want beside me, whatever the future brings." They left at dawn the next morning, taking only what they could carry on Sawyer's horse. The journey through the pass was arduous, the trail narrow and treacherous with ice in places, but they reached the other side by nightfall. The settlement Sawyer had mentioned was little more than a cluster of cabins and a general store, but the residents welcomed them without suspicion. An elderly couple named the Hendersons offered them shelter in an unused trapper's cabin on their property in exchange for Sawyer's help with winter chores. As winter deepened, Delilah and Sawyer settled into their temporary home. They were married by a traveling preacher who passed through the settlement just before Christmas, with the entire small community attending the simple ceremony. Life in the mountains was challenging but rewarding. Delilah began teaching the settlement's children, gathering them in the communal meeting house 3 days a week. Sawyer worked alongside the other men, hunting and maintaining the community's buildings against the harsh weather. At night, they returned to their small cabin where they shared their hopes and plans for the future. Sawyer spoke of returning to his claim in the spring, using the gold to buy a small ranch where they could raise horses and cattle. Delilah dreamed of establishing a proper school, perhaps even in Riverbend once the railroad brought more families to the area. Winter eventually gave way to spring, the snow retreating up the mountainsides as warm Chinook winds swept through the valleys. With the changing season came news from beyond their isolated haven, including word that Vance Thornton had died in a saloon brawl in Cheyenne. "You think it's true?" Delilah asked as they discussed the news that evening. "The Henderson boy heard it from the mail carrier who got it from Cheyenne directly," Sawyer replied. "I'm inclined to believe it. So we could go back to your cabin, to your claim," Sawyer nodded slowly. "If that's what you want." Delilah considered this. "What I want is a life with you, Sawyer. Whether that's at your claim or somewhere new doesn't matter to me." He smiled, taking her hand. "Then let's go home. We can rebuild what Thornton's men might have destroyed, maybe expand the cabin now that there's 2 of us." They departed the settlement, with the community's good wishes, Sawyer promising to return in the fall with supplies for the winter. The journey back took several days, but when they finally crested the ridge overlooking Sawyer's Valley, both were surprised to find smoke rising from the chimney of his cabin. "Someone's there," Sawyer said, reaching for his rifle. They approached cautiously, leading the horse through the trees until they could see the cabin clearly. A familiar figure sat on the porch dock Pritchard, whittling a piece of wood as he waited. "About time you 2 showed up," the old man called when he spotted them. "Been keeping your home fires burning for near on a week now." Relief flooded through them as they hurried forward to greet their friend. Doc embraced them both, beaming with pleasure. "Married, are you?" he observed, noting their matching simple gold bands. "Knew that would happen the moment I saw you together." Inside the cabin, they found not destruction but renewal. Doc had repaired the door that Thornton's men had damaged and had even built a new chair to match the one already there. Daniel Eagle rode and his brothers helped, Doc explained. "They've been checking on the place regularly, making sure no one else decided to move in. The claim's still producing too. They've kept your share of the gold safe at the trading post." "How are they?" Delilah asked anxiously. "After the raid, doing well," Doc assured her. "Old man Eagle Road recovered from his wound, though he walks with a limp now. Their trading post is busier than ever with the new settlers coming through." As they shared a meal, Doc caught them up on other news. The town of Riverbend was indeed growing rapidly with the railroad's arrival, and they were actively seeking a schoolteacher. "Would be perfect for you, Delilah," Doc suggested. "It's close enough that Sawyer could still work his claim, and you'd have the school you've talked about." Sawyer looked at his wife questioningly. "Is that something you'd want to consider?" Delilah's eyes lit up. "To have a proper school with real books and supplies. Yes, I think I would." "Well, that's settled then," Doc said with satisfaction. "You two get yourselves established here again, and come fall, we'll talk to the Riverbend Town Council about that teaching position." After Doc departed the next morning, Sawyer and Delilah stood on the porch of their cabin, surveying the land that was now truly their home. "It feels different coming back," Delilah observed. "Like everything has changed, yet nothing has." Sawyer put his arm around her shoulders. "The land doesn't change much, but we have." She leaned into him, content in a way she had never imagined possible during those dark days at the auction block. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Spending everything you had that day?" Sawyer turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Delilah, that was the best investment I ever made. I gave up gold and got something priceless in return." "What was that?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "A future," he replied simply. "Our future together." As spring blossomed into summer, Sawyer and Delilah rebuilt and expanded their life together. The cabin grew by 2 rooms, a proper kitchen, and a small study where Delilah could prepare her lessons. Sawyer's mining claim continued to produce enough gold to support them comfortably, and by fall, Delilah had secured the position as Riverbend's schoolteacher. They settled into a rhythm, with Delilah teaching in town 3 days a week while Sawyer worked his claim. On the days she taught, they stayed in a small room above the general store, returning to their mountain home for the remainder of the week. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Delilah's father, was born the following spring. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah, named for their friend at the trading post who had become like a sister to Delilah. As the children grew, so did the community around them. Riverbend expanded into a proper town with a church, a bank, and eventually, a brick schoolhouse where Delilah served as headmistress. Sawyer used his mining proceeds to purchase adjoining land, gradually building the ranch he had once only dreamed of owning. The Eagle Road family's trading post evolved into a successful mercantile business that served both settlers and native tribes, helping to forge better relations between the communities. Doc Pritchard, though advancing in years, continued to care for the health of everyone in the region, training young Daniel Eagle Road in medicine to carry on his work. On the 10th anniversary of the day Sawyer had bid for Delilah at the auction, they hosted a gathering at their ranch for all the friends who had helped them along their journey. As twilight descended and lanterns were lit around the expanded homestead, Sawyer found Delilah standing alone on the porch, watching their children play with the Eagle Road children in the yard. "Happy," he asked, coming to stand beside her. Delilah turned to him, the girl from the auction block, now a confident woman who had helped shape their corner of the Wyoming territory. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," she replied, taking his hand. "That day in Opal, I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning." Sawyer's eyes, still the color of a summer storm but now crinkled at the corners from years of smiling, held hers with the same intensity as when they had first met. "I set out to free you that day," he said softly, "never realizing you would free me too." "From what?" she asked. "Loneliness." "The belief that I was meant to walk through life alone." He gestured to the scene before them, their thriving ranch, their beautiful children, their gathered friends. "You gave me all of this, Delilah. A home. A family." "We gave it to each other," she corrected, leaning into his embrace as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue sky. "And I wouldn't change a single moment of our journey." As night fell completely over the Wyoming frontier that had tested them, challenged them, and ultimately embraced them, Sawyer and Delilah Zimmerman stood together on the porch of the home they had built, their love a testament to the power of one brave choice made on a dusty auction yard a decade before, when a cowboy had bid everything he had and set free not just a captive woman but both their hearts.